Hi, my name is Avinash Konikam, and I'm presenting Divinity in the Mortal Figure, the Vitruvian Man, and how Leonardo da Vinci connects man and God. The meaning of God. Before we get in, I also want to make sure that this presentation does have a lot of Christian beliefs permeated throughout it. I'm not trying to force this on anybody or any of that sort. It's just really important to talk about because it's really relevant to the period, the artist, the artwork itself. It's pretty important that we talk about these aspects and beliefs. So, the meaning of God. Well, we know that God, under the Christian belief, is all good. He's all-powerful, and he's essentially the perfect being. He's the creator. He made everything. And because of this, because of these three aspects, he is regarded as divine, and his divinity is contrasted to us, our mortality. Leonardo da Vinci was one of the biggest believers in aspects like this. He was Catholic, and while he was working under Verrocchio's workshop, he had come across multiple kinds of artworks, beliefs, art styles. He worked on these kinds of arts while also working under Verrocchio's internships in science and mathematics and inventions. Leonardo da Vinci himself was ahead of his time. He was Catholic. He was a very good scientist for the period that he worked in. He was a Renaissance man, both literally and metaphorically. Literally, because he lived during the Renaissance, and metaphorically, because a Renaissance man can also mean people who are extremely inventive, creative, progressive, all of which was Leonardo da Vinci. And of course, Leonardo da Vinci was an artist, or else we wouldn't be talking about it right now. This is all important because during the Renaissance, Leonardo da Vinci had encountered multiple kinds of opinions, right? Again, keep in mind that Leonardo da Vinci was Catholic, and he was, even though he was a scientist, he still had a strong belief in God. He had a belief in God that he was all those things that we just mentioned previously. And so when people like Leonardo encounter skepticism during the Renaissance, for example, when Girolamo Savonarola kind of made a small movement towards doubting God during the Renaissance, as increasing progression, diversity, and again, science had led to some doubts during the Renaissance, you could expect Leonardo da Vinci, with his strong beliefs, could react. Now, before we get back to how he might have reacted, let's take a bit on a comparison, a contemporary movement that reacted in a very similar way to Leonardo da Vinci. The Science of Mind, written by Ernest Holmes, it was made to combine these aspects of the laws of science, the opinions of philosophy, and the revelations of religion. See, Ernest Holmes was part of this movement called the New Thought movement that occurred during the 1900s, and it was basically a New Thought movement that was made in response to ideas of evolution. Once evolution became a more and more popular theory during the 1900s, it had led to this rift between scientists and people who were religious, ignoring the people who were both, because scientists had believed in evolution versus the people who were religious believed in creationism. Those two couldn't exactly mix. So what the New Thought movement did is they combined science and religion. They said that God could have created the world such that science exists, such that evolution is a thing. The New Thought movement was responding to these criticisms of essentially both sides and said, hold on, we can make these sides coexist. And so that's what they did. I believe Leonardo da Vinci did something very similar. See, in response to what he learned during his own studies, seeing other people criticize science for how it didn't believe in God or how it doubted God, or seeing people criticize religion for how it doubted science, Leonardo da Vinci combined scientific detail with religious beliefs and said that science and religion did coexist when he made the Vitruvian Man. The Vitruvian Man, we'll kind of talk more about it in the following slides, but you can see it's mainly a figure with two main poses and meticulous detail and notes on the sides. A connection, which is between nature and man. How could you connect this? How could you make it so that both of these are actually intertwined? how could you make it that you could say to the skeptics that religion did in fact exist, but you could also say to the scientists that, so that you could say to the skepticist that religion did in fact exist, and that you could say to the religious that science did in fact work. You could use the Vitruvian Man, which is what Leonardo da Vinci did. I believe that he created this not only for his own research, but for the purpose of proving, at least to himself, that this connection existed. Let's talk a little about the poses of the Vitruvian Man. He has this straight pose figure, which is the T-pose figure. It's inscribed within a square at 90-degree angles, and you could see that because it's a square, the side lengths have to be the same. So it shows that the Vitruvian Man's wingspan is equal to the Vitruvian Man's height. You could also see the angled pose figure, where the arms are bent to the height line. That means where the tip of the arms is equal to where your height line is, or it's where the height line. The legs are bent at 45-degree angles, and all those bent limbs are circumscribed by a circle, where the circle's circumcenter is at the navel. Why is this important? And you can see a little about those squares inscribed and the circle inscribed. Why is this important? Because it's actually not super important, although it's definitely interesting for something to be inscribed within either of those figures. But what's important is that it can be inscribed within both. The Vitruvian Man has poses that can be within a square or a circle. This requires very specific geometric proportions and extreme attention to detail, which, of course, under Leonardo da Vinci, could be described as perfect detail, possibly under God's creation, of which something was meticulously made by a creator. That connection between man and nature, where man and nature were both perfectly made, and thus could have this creator. We'll also talk about some of the other geometric inferences about the Vitruvian Man. There's symmetry around the navel region. Some people believe that if you were to rotate the square that the Vitruvian Man is inscribed in, you could have multiple other figures popping up. Some people believe there's a golden ratio, except that's not really true. The ratio between the side length and the radius of the square and the radius of the circle, it's close, but it's not actually the golden ratio. A lot of people believe there are implied squares about the golden ratio that you would be able to find if you were to draw more lines. And finally, we get to the most important geometric inference, which is actually true about the proportions between the height, wingspan, and torso. Yes, they are very specific, and it's actually what leads to being able to be inscribed in both. The style of the Vitruvian Man. Now that we're done talking about the actual geometric proportions and reason of, and how it's made, we can talk about the style. And of course, it's the Renaissance style made by Leonardo da Vinci. But how does the Vitruvian Man encapsulate the Renaissance? We can see that it's definitely Renaissance style, but this is a Renaissance painting, and of course it has more meaning beyond that. It encapsulates the Renaissance because not only does the Vitruvian Man has this scientific and meticulous detail, of course represented with all that geometry talk we had before, it still has that Renaissance-defining art style that we were just getting into, that Leonardo da Vinci, his style almost defines the Renaissance and how influential it is. And the Vitruvian Man is a combination of both. We can see some of the lasting effects of the Vitruvian Man. Here is one of Puyo's De Architectura. It has a figure that's very similar to the Vitruvian Man. You can see what I was talking before about if you were to draw more lines, you can get very important points around the Vitruvian Man's figure that could be leading to very interesting discoveries. Before we get into the actual diverse effects of the Vitruvian Man, I'd like to talk about why. Why does he have this many effects? Well, remember who the Vitruvian Man's creator is. Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci also had lasting effects on many fields. It wasn't just the Vitruvian Man that did everything, but the Vitruvian Man itself is able to have these lasting effects because it was Leonardo da Vinci making it. I'd like to emphasize this point because I think the artwork speaks for itself on how important the meaning is between man and nature, but the artist gives it even more influence. It's associated with health and fitness. Some people believe that because the Vitruvian Man is the ideal figure, or the perfect figure created under God, then it's the ideal figure for health. There are many kinds of artworks that are associated with the Vitruvian Man. Here we see Glad Day by William Blank, where it kind of shows the Vitruvian Man if he was free from being inscribed, as if those squares and circles were a prison, and he's happy, he's finally out. This one's a fun one, Andrew Leicester. It's the Vitruvian Man, kind of. It shows a Tin Man, but I think what's important about here is you can see a Tin Man, and you can see his proportions are just like the Vitruvian Man. It shows that the perfect figure isn't just bound by humans, or to humans. We could make the perfect figure, so if we can make the perfect figure in our Tin Man, what made the ideal figure in us? Finally, we get to the Vitruvian Woman, showing that the ideal figure isn't just limited by gender. It's a pretty important drawing, although it was received with a lot of kind of criticism because of how obviously explicit it is. And of course, it's associated with Italy. Italy does love Leonardo da Vinci. He's a very proud countryman to them. This is the €1 coin that is shown on the back of. Kind of references Leonardo da Vinci, kind of references the ideal figure under God, both things Italy is very proud of. Before we end off, I'd like to reemphasize this important takeaway. The Vitruvian Man is mathematically made, and we're laying this out as like premises to a conclusion. The Vitruvian Man is mathematically made. The Vitruvian Man is perfect, and perfection is an aspect of God, right? So we can make a connection between two of these premises. The Vitruvian Man is mathematically made, and the Vitruvian Man is perfect. We can make perfect beings via this extreme attention to geometric proportion. We can also have perfect beings as an aspect of God. If God permeates all of us, then the man that is a result of him could be perfect as a result. Finally, we have the last takeaway, or the conclusion from all of this, is God permeates/created all of us because our ideal figure is perfect. If the Vitruvian Man is perfectly made, then, again, remember that the Vitruvian Man is supposed to represent the ideal human figure. We can make a Vitruvian Man via extreme attention to geometric proportion. Perhaps God made the ideal human figure because of his extreme attention to geometric proportion. And thus our ideal figure is perfect because he knew what perfect was, as it was himself. Here are my references, and thank you.